Michele begins her story at the point in her life when she realizes with a shock that she is not person-centered when she thought she was. Moreover, that the workplace culture was inconducive to person-centered practice. With the help of her critical companion, she learned that transforming self is the antecedent to transforming culture, practice, and systems, and that she could become a critical companion to the staff. However, she found the critical companionship framework too incomprehensible to be able to take it all in. This is a common experience. Her companion helped her to break it down into parts, experience them in practice, and then build it back up to embody it. You can hear more about that in part 1 of this video. In part 2, you can hear about her very effective and rigorous solution to the problem.
My story is one where I was a manager and a leader within a mental health and older person service, believing that I was person-centered. But actually, as I grew to have greater knowledge of what, and facilitated to have greater knowledge of what person-centeredness really meant, using critical creativity and different methods of being able to enlighten and empower people, I changed my mind. I changed my way of working and changed my understanding, and realized actually that I didn't have an in-depth understanding of person-centered care or person-centered practice or person-centered cultures, even though that this was something that I believed I had a good understanding. And I was well educated and had a master's degree at that time. So it is important that it's about awakening and being open to new ways of working and new ways of learning.
New ways of thinking and seeing the world.
How that impacted on the service that I worked in, so in the systems and the service. The unit that one of the units that I was responsible for was a unit where there was a lot of residents who had complicated and complex dementias, with a mental health component there, and there was lots of incidents of violence and aggression, unfortunately, and behaviours that challenged staff. And within 2 years, we moved from having a significant number of incidents to having none, because we changed our ways of working and our ways of understanding the residents and what was happening to them. And I just want to emphasize that the whole team came on board. Although there was some resistance to this change or this transformation, it was a multi-professional group of a consultant psychiatrist, a nursing team, occupational therapy and psychology. So it is important that this was a multi-professional approach to this change that happened. I was facilitated by Professor Dewing, who came intermittently to our unit, and we had workshops and critical reflective sessions to enable us as participants to start to think differently about what we did and what we saw and how we behaved, how we worked with others. And that was, over time, an extremely beneficial. Of course, it starts with self, and I think it's really important that we don't change everything around us until we change ourselves, until we look inwards. And that takes some intrinsic courage, because there is actually that inbuilt resistance to transformation and change from our own perspectives, and in some ways an acknowledgement that maybe we weren't doing it in the best way possible, even though we believed we were.
And was this realization the kind of the seedbed really for what became your doctoral work and your critical ally, critical friend ideas as a kind of novice moving more towards advanced beginner and so on, towards expertise as a critical companion? Is that where this bloomed? And
absolutely, like
group,
because our program was so successful in this unit, I started to think about what happened. How did this happen? And it was slow, and it was a gradual change. It was a culture shift, and as you know, a culture shift takes quite a long time. So I started to reflect back on, well, what did happen, and I talked to Professor Dewing, who was kind of leading, and she was talking about, and she introduced me to critical companionship, and she of course was influenced by you, Angie, to use critical companionship. And although she wasn't naming it at that time, she was certainly using all of the elements within that. And as I started to get interested into what self-examination of what transformed or what helped me to think differently, she asked me to kind of have a look and critique some of your critique the model of critical companionship, and to be able to kind of break it down and see what it meant. And it was, of course, extremely complex. And I'd say a lot of people will tell you that critical companionship is the ultimate. So it encompasses all of the complexity of facilitation. And I think as I was introduced originally to it, it was too complex for me to comprehend at that time. So I was introduced to it by Jan in smaller pieces. And she was, using the temporality and the particularity of the conditions and the setting, knowing when to introduce certain elements, when not to. If I had been, let's say, challenged too early, I may have rejected the whole program. I may not have been open to transformation in the same way if the challenge had come too quickly. So it was that understanding of this pacing and having embodying and working with the people around you in a gentle way that helped them. And these were the things that emerged later as I moved away from the service I was working in and moved into an acute hospital setting, which is where I developed the models based on philosophical concepts and theoretical concepts, and then tested them, critical ally and critical friend, in practice. With well, my research was with nursing leaders. However, it has since been used by a broader group here. And I think the beauty is that it breaks it down into smaller pieces. It's not linear, of course. Facilitation and its elements are not linear, but it's helpful to break it down into something that we can.
This reminds me of two colleagues who they wrote about it actually, and published it, how they decided to be critical companions to each other, and they decided that they couldn't eat the whole elephant all at once. So they decided to break the elephant down into edible parts. And that's how they helped each other to make sense of it. Because yes, you're absolutely right, it is complex, because real expertise in person-centered facilitation is complex. And it really requires us to use a whole different ways of knowing, practice wisdom, professional artistry, as well as person-centered relationship processes and strategies and facilitation strategy. It's complex. So it's fantastic to hear that you did the same.
Well, I suppose I would emphasize is that I broke it down to build it up, and I call them stepping stones towards critical companionship, because it is that process of learning trying out new ways of working, trying out new approaches to perhaps working with colleagues that we know already and are doing different. So we're working as insiders. Like my research was based here in the Galway Clinic, and I worked as an insider researcher with my colleagues to be able to work with them to help them look at the systems and processes and the influences and themselves, and how their actions and ways of being with others was impacting on ultimately on our care processes.